bird! It's a plane! No, it's the two directors of Superman making a cameo in Rick and Morty. You're watching WhitneyVision, and these are all the Easter eggs and details you might have missed in Ricker Than Fiction. This is your spoiler warning! If you haven't seen Season 8, Episode 7 yet, hit pause on this video and come back once you've finished writing the next great action movie. The making of this episode is especially interesting, first and foremost because they got James Gunn and Zack Snyder to voice act parodies of themselves. Until I started doing research, I never realized that both of these dudes are huge Rick and Morty fans. In an interview with Variety, executive producer Scott Marder said, both of those guys sort of implied that this is the show they watch when they have downtime. So they were thrilled to get to be a part of the world, and there was no pushback or bristling. If anything, they laughed at anything we threw at them. There were probably frankly even more digs and more silly things we could have used. All they did was laugh it off. According to Marder, despite the fact that James Gunn was in full-blown Superman production mode, he still made time for Rick and Morty. He swung by the studio to record his lines with Zack on the very same day that Superman finalized principal production. So that tells you just how huge of a fan he is. Likewise, Zack Snyder included a Rick and Morty Easter egg in Justice League in the scene where Batfleck breaks into the Flash's lab to ask him to join the team. One of Barry's monitors is playing Something Ricked This Way Comes in the background. These guys actually posted a photo together from the day that they recorded that went viral, but nobody knew at the time that it was for a spot on this show. Dan Harmon even came out of his semi-writing retirement to personally script the dialogue in their scene. He's been pretty vocal about the fact that he's stepped back from actively writing scripts, choosing to let the talented staff writers find the heartbeat of the series. As a fan of Dan's writing, I was stoked to hear that he felt passionate enough about the material to step back in the ring for a minute. Apparently, the idea of the movie-lizer was something that spent time floating around the writer's room before they found a way to make it work. Initially, the machine was going to be a bookalizer, in the episode that revolved around Jerry writing a novel. But they decided to pivot to movies, taking inspiration from Transformers, Fast and Furious, the MCU, and the Justice League to craft the world of Maximum Velocity. This week's episode title, Ricker Than Fiction, is a parody of Stranger Than Fiction, an early 2000s movie about Will Ferrell, a regular guy who starts hearing a disembodied narrator in his head. Likewise, when Rick and Morty are trapped inside the movie-lizer machine, Jerry becomes that disembodied plot spinner for them. The ep opens with a glimpse into the 9th installment of the Maximum Velocity Cinematic Universe, or the MVT, an obvious parody of the MCU. It's also parodying the movie title Maximum Velocity, a disaster film about a comet that causes a cataclysmic storm as it passes by Earth. Fun fact, in the French dub of the episode, the Maximum Velocities are called the Abrengers, a portmanteau of abre, the French word for tree, and Avengers. One of my favorite details from the episode is that the scenes from the MVT are shown in 2:25:1 aspect ratio, aka CinemaScope or anamorphic widescreen, which is a wide cinematic format used to create an immersive experience in cinemas or specialty in-home theaters. But let's meet our sap-filled superheroes, the Robo-Trees! Each tree-shaped member of the team have a number on the front of their suits, which reminds me a lot of the big fours on the front of the Fantastic Four suits. We've got Redwood, the hothead who primarily uses a gun in battle. Interestingly, his namesake is a tree that's known for being somewhat resistant to fire. Then we have Palm Dior, a super genius with a helicopter head and deadly bombs. His namesake is a play on the Palme d'Or or the Golden Palm, which is the highest award at the Cannes Film Festival. As the award suggests, palms and their fronds have a long history symbolizing a wide range of idealized and erudite qualities, all fitting for the Velocitree's resident Renaissance man. Next, we have Cypress, the girl boss of the group. I'm not sure why she's a cypress, but her namesakes are evergreens that are associated with spirituality, death, and the afterlife. Then we have Arbor Knight, their crystal sword and light shield carrying leader. My best guess is that he's supposed to be a red oak, due to being the dependable Optimus Prime-esque leader. But I'm not gonna lie, he looks a little bit more like a mushroom. I wonder if that's because leaders can come off a bit dickish. Lastly, there's Tannenbaum, the comic relief. The word Tannenbaum actually means Christmas tree in German, which is why he looks like one. I personally love that the Robo-Tree's theme song is a Maximum Velocity parody of 1 Week by the Bare Naked Ladies. But if you don't, I have one question for you.
The Bare Naked Ladies are triple platinum, are you?
Close enough, welcome back community. 6 seasons and a movie, baby! The villains of our story are Baron Thistle and his henchweeds, who are hell-bent on destroying the universe. Baron Thistle wants to use the Tarnation casket to create a negative feedback that will tear their world apart. And later, newly appointed team leader Samantha is very excited to melt the polar ice caps, sending the planet into a much faster global warming. As the movie ends, we see a bunch of names of IRL Rick and Morty crew members in the closing credits. We've got Catherine Wheaton, office coordinator, Daniel Cacciatorian, assistant production manager, Jackie Cadiente, art department, character design cleanup, Julia Glassman, storyboard artist Brent Knoll, prop design lead Jack Inguanti, color coordinator Steve Levy, executive producer Maya Shazvin, character designer Byron Merrill, character designer Ryan H. Ryan H could be Ryan Hansen, who was an actor in 2 episodes, including Rick Fending Your Mort, Brad Lewis, character designer, Kelly Yu, prop design lead, Helen Bell, background designer, Ryan Cohen, compositor/tech director, Noel Rollick, design assistant, Will McCarthy, IT/tech, John Bodley, background designer, and Jennifer Vogan, associate producer. When Rick is pissing on the TV because he hates the movie so much, you can see the interdimensional cable box sitting on the television stand. Morty doesn't dislike it nearly as much and claims that it's no Citizen Kane, a movie that everyone says is the best ever made. Turns out that Rick is a toxic fanboy and is enraged by the MVT's decline in quality. Morty tries to suggest that maybe it's possible that Rick just isn't a fan of that world anymore. But Rick insists on storming into James Gunn's office to give him a piece of his mind. Based on what I've seen online, fans are divided on the overall theme of this episode. Some folks are sick of being preached to about toxicity in fandoms. They want to see a classic Rick and Morty adventure, not listen to a bunch of Hollywood fuckos jerk themselves off about how hard it is to write superhero movies. A lot of people find Dan Harmon's self-inserts out of touch, pretentious, and cringe. So this episode's overall message of "leave the writing to the writers, kids" is probably a turnoff. I've also noticed that a lot of fans feel like they can't express their valid negative criticisms of the franchise without being labeled toxic. And if you're already feeling like your opinions are being silenced, of course you're not going to enjoy being scolded at by a stoner cartoon. But I think that the messaging is a little more nuanced than "you're not allowed to have a negative opinion of the MCU or you're canceled." That simply isn't true. I talk about movies and TV shows for a living, so please believe me when I tell you that you are absolutely allowed to have your own opinions on entertainment. Twitter was literally invented so that you could post things like "CGI Flash babies look busted as fuck" without consequence. It's not that stating your opinion is toxic, it's the way that some people express their opinions that can be toxic. In this episode, Rick is a caricature of the most extreme kind of toxic fan. He doesn't represent the people who think that the MCU fell off after WandaVision, or people who like Heath Ledger's Joker more than Joaquin Phoenix's. He represents the assholes who make enjoying something a living hell for creators and other fans alike. So if you don't want to be preached at by this show, that's a totally valid opinion to have. But just in case you're like, "Hey, those guys are calling me a whiner," don't worry, they're probably not talking about you. For the other half of us that did like the episode, we've got valid reasons too. Again, I talk about movies and TV shows for a living, so I have to hear from legitimately toxic fans all the time. And it's annoying! Like, damn, let me enjoy the Thunderbolts without relentlessly calling me a Disney shill. Toxic fans are definitely in the minority, but they're a very loud minority. They start bad faith arguments on Twitter, review bomb The Acolyte before it even comes out, and hatefully rail against creators who are just trying to do their thing. Bro, I'm sorry that you didn't like Ant-Man 3. Nobody thought MODOK looked cool. Stop making it everyone else's problem and just don't watch the next one. I'm with Morty here. I think that a lot of toxic fans simply don't enjoy the franchises they bitch about anymore. But instead of saying, "Man, maybe the new Star Wars just isn't for me," and getting into Poker Face or Hacks instead, they intentionally try to hurt the people who work on and enjoy these shows. That's not cool. Find a new franchise to like and quit harassing people who don't agree with you. But shit, now I'm preaching. Back to the Easter eggs! Rick, Morty, and Jerry head to the WB lot in Burbank, California to give James Gunn a piece of their minds. Shout out to my friend who works there. She confirmed that the cafeteria design on this episode is extremely accurate. Inside James's office, we see a ton of Maximum Velocity merch, including 5 movie posters on his wall, a model of the Robotree space jet, action figures of the Robotrees, 1 Arbor Knight Funko Pop, and a Robotrees logo shield. On his bookshelf, he has an MVT6 book, an MVT lunchbox, some figurines, 2 Oscars, Super Guy comics, a nod to his work on Superman, and an Art of Superbook. As a nod to his iconic taste in music, there's also a framed album on his wall. The weirdest find, however, is this book that looks like it reads The Gilly Girls. I googled it, and the Gilly Girls are a bluegrass gospel band made up of 2 sets of twin sisters. I have absolutely no idea what they have to do with James Gunn, or if they're even the correct reference here. But James Gunn does have a wildly eclectic taste in music. music. Maybe he's gotten really into redneck Jesus jams. Who knows? Ooh, it's the ghost of Whitney Future here. My husband pointed out that this is likely a reference to the Gilmore Girls, the Warner-owned dramedy where James's brother Sean got his break as town oddball Kirk. The desk that Rick destroys was carved by Bradley Cooper, one of James's favorite actors to collaborate with. Not only did they work on the Guardians trilogy together with Bradley as Rocket Raccoon, James also gave him a minor role as Superman's dad Kal-El in his new Superman film. Rick tries to insult him by saying that he was only hired at WB so that he could pitch Batman ideas to himself. But isn't that kind of the dream? Don't we all want to get paid to think about Batman all day?
You guys are getting paid?
After stealing the script for Maximum Velocity 10 and portaling home, Jerry's left behind in Burbank to call an Uber. So, does that mean that the Smith-Sanchez family lives within Ubering distance of the WB lot in the Parmesan dimension? Does that mean that the Parmy D also has the Americana at Brand in Glendale? God, I hope so. Back home, Rick sets up the Movielizer, a machine that makes movies at the speed of thought and is clearly a riff on AI and ChatGPT. On screen, it says that the script for MVT-10 was written by Alan Smithtree. Alan Smithy was the official pseudonym used by filmmakers on projects they wished to disown. Coined by the Directors Guild of America in 1968, it was first used on the film Death of a Gunfighter. Lead actor Richard Widmark was unhappy with the work of director Robert Totten and had him replaced by another director, Don Siegel. The whole situation was super dramatic and messy, and by the end of it, neither director wanted his name associated with the film. They were able to argue in front of the DGA that the final product didn't represent either of their creative vision for the movie whatsoever, and were ultimately allowed to put a fake name on the original script. At first, the DGA wanted to use the name Al Smith to remain as ambiguous as possible, but it turned out that there were already a few real people named Al Smith working in Hollywood at the time, and they didn't want to fuck up those guys' careers by associating them exclusively with shitty movies. They tested out Alan Smith with one E at the end, but that was also deemed too dicey because it could easily turn out to be someone's real name in the future. So they settled on Alan Smith E with two E's at the end, hoping that no one's last name would ever be spelled that dumb, and that general audiences wouldn't suspect a thing. James Gunn did say that this version of the script had a total of 40 passes, so it makes sense that he'd want to put a pseudonym on it. When female writers wanted to drop their names from a project, Alana or Ellen Smithy were used instead. The DGA discontinued the use of Alan Smithy in the year 2000, but it's still commonly used by independent filmmakers outside of the Directors Guild. After messing with the movie to make Tannenbaum kill Baron Thistle in cold blood, a news broadcast sharing the story reads "One horse open sleigh." Get it? Because he's a Christmas tree guy? Morty justifies their story changes by claiming that he's sick of that formula-driven Save the Cat bullshit. Save the Cat is a book by Blake Snyder that teaches storytelling plot structure that are widely used throughout Hollywood. His Save the Cat rule states that a hero must do something to make audiences like them and want to win. Like when Superman saves the squirrel in James Gunn's latest blockbuster. When Rick and Morty get sucked into the Movielizer portal, they make the same faces and poses that they did when they fell into the fake vat of acid in Season 4, or when they fell into the fake vat of sun flames in Season 6's A Rick and King Arthur's Mort. As they're pulled into the simulation, Rick exclaims that the Movielizer last action heroed them, a reference to the 90s movie about a kid who gets sucked into the fake Arnold Schwarzenegger Jack Slater film franchise. Jerry sends the guys a 2007 Kia Spectra, certified safe by Edmunds.com, a car ratings and research website. When they get to Baron Thistle's mausoleum, the outside of the structure reads, "Here lies Baron Thistle. He died doing what he loved. Hating trees." While Jerry explains that Rick and Morty have to get the story back on track if they want to escape, the Dan Harmon story circle pops up on screen, and he tells them that their current script is going linear, aka straying too far from the rules of the story circle. I love that Morty thinks that Save the Cat is bullshit, but listening to his dad work out the Harmon story circle is his only hope. We all went through that phase in film school after our first watch through of Community. We've seen the Dan Harmon story circle explained on the show before, back in Season 4's Never Rick and Morty. But just to refresh your memory, the idea is that it takes 3 acts and 8 steps to tell a good story. Act 1 is the order you know, Act 2 is chaos, and Act 3 is the new order. The contents of those acts contain the steps you, need, go, struggle, find, suffer, return, and change, which boil down to a character in their zone of comfort wants something, so they enter an unfamiliar situation to which they have to adapt in order to get what they want. Yet, they have to make a sacrifice before they can can return to the familiar situation, having changed fundamentally. If you've watched any of Dan Harmon's shows or seen movies written by students of the Story Circle, you've seen this play out beat for beat in vastly different ways in countless pieces of media. A lot of people online had a problem with the inclusion of the Story Circle in this episode because it's just a repeat lesson from another Dan Harmon self-insert episode, and that's fair. But as a film school nerd, I really like it when they explain behind-the-scenes writing and production techniques. I had to listen to some old dude in a blazer read out loud from Save the Cat in a 500-person lecture hall. Kids these days get to watch a half hour of Rick and Morty and get the same information without having to take out a single student loan to learn it, and I just think that's neat. Over at the confirmed visually accurate WB commissary, James and Zach are talking Superman. A couple of Zach's forearm tattoos are visible in this scene, the one that spells out his wife's name Deborah and a flowery vine. Zach roasts James about turning Superman from the Man of Steel into the Man of Conversation because of the 12-minute scene of pure expository dialogue between Clark and Lois and Superman. He also tells him to work out more because Zack Snyder is ripped. Interestingly, the animators drew these guys roughly the same height, but IRL, Zack Snyder is 5'7" and James Gunn is 6 feet. And Zack Snyder has 8 kids, so never let them tell you that short kings aren't out here fucking. I see you, short kings, you're beautiful. Zack mentions that Rick once sealed Christopher Nolan inside of a giant bookcase to punish him for making Interstellar. I really love the joke where James said that he gave notes on the Count Chocula movie that morning. I highly recommend that you go watch Seth Rogen's new show, The Studio, because it has an incredibly funny episode about this where they try to trick Martin Scorsese into directing the Kool-Aid Man movie. When Hollywood execs aren't thinking about putting butts in movie theater seats, they're thinking about all the licensed tie-in merch that they're gonna sell to suckers with children or adult nerds with disposable income. It's not really a secret that making a Lego movie sells more Legos, or that making a Barbie movie sells more Barbies. But there are just some brands that really don't need a movie. Maybe I'm wrong and Mattel will blow me out of the water with the world building and cinematography, but I really don't think we need a Magic 8-Ball movie, or Jerry Seinfeld's Pop-Tart movie, or James Gunn's fictional Count Chocula movie. The only one I would absolutely watch is Scorsese's dark, gritty take on the Kool-Aid Man for obvious reasons. It seems like writing these kinds of brand-heavy movies has become an inside joke amongst writers, actors, and filmmakers, who often have to do them as a one-for-me, one-for-them sacrifice. Big-budget, toy-selling blockbusters simply pay the bills better than indie art house cinema, so creatives often take on these soul-sucking projects as a way to make ends meet, or to satisfy studio heads who want to champion less risky ventures. That way, they'll have a pocket full of Mattel's money when it comes time to make the movies or shows they actually want to make, giving their passion projects a better shot at success and stability. Off on their separate adventures, Rick and Morty are slowly learning that there's a lot more to love about the characters they originally hated than they thought. Morty finds out that the henchweeds don't just want global domination, they also want to be seen, respected, and taken seriously by their leader. Rick similarly discovers that Tannenbaum is pretty self-aware about his shortcomings, and is more than willing to partake in the part of the story circle where a character is thrown into chaos, rises to adapt, and comes out changed. Here, Rick actually gets to experience something about a James Gunn movie that all fans do. The moment where you suddenly find yourself caring deeply about a character you previously overlooked. He is so great at taking lesser-known characters and making you fall in love with them. When Rick and Tannenbaum reunite with the Robo-Trees, Redwood shows them a twig talk of Morty threatening Operation Complete and Total Polar Ice Cap's destruction, a tree-themed parody of TikTok. After pulling up to the Smith house in his Dodge Challenger, James Gunn tries to convince Jerry to hand over the movielizer by offering to help turn Jerry's dinosaur book into a movie. Somehow, James Gunn got his hands on a copy of Never Trying Never Fails, the book Jerry wrote in Season 6's Jurassic Mort. After popping an Adderall, Jerry is ready to write the next great American Super Tree movie. With both the Robo-Trees and the henchweeds against them, Jerry sends Rick and Morty on a high-speed car chase with tons of Tokyo drifting involved. The dude that hands over the keys to his Lamborghini was also the driver of the blue sports car in the post-credits scene of Season 4's Claw and Hoarder Special Rick and Morty. As they race through the streets of NYC, you can see a marquee sign for Crapopolis, the musical on Broadway, a reference to Dan Harmon's animated sitcom. In the end, Rick and Morty learn a valuable lesson. Sometimes it's easier to be a hard-to-please fan than it is to write a better script than the professionals. But even though Zach and James claim during their conversation that no one can do what they do, I still absolutely believe that I could fix the entire Sony Spider-Verse if you gave me 3 Red Bulls in an afternoon. I get the point that they're trying to make. It's really challenging to tell a story that resonates with billions of people who all have vastly different life experiences and opinions. Sometimes that many outside opinions can make it difficult to follow your own artistic vision. For example, I mentioned in my Season 8 Episode 1 breakdown that the writers of this show have chosen to return to more episodic storytelling because the internet had already predicted a lot of the storylines they intended to surprise us with. When you have assholes like me looking at every frame of an episode for details, it can be hard to come up with a lore continuation that people aren't already theorizing about. I actually agree with both sides. There are some toxic fans out there who make creators' lives a living hell. And I do wish that those people understand that if they were asked to do the same tasks up to the same standards, they wouldn't be able to do it. But that being said, I really think that if you think you can improve on a script, go for it. If you want to rewrite Ant-Man 3, you go for it. Share it with your friends, share it with the internet, share it as a spec script that you submit when you apply for a screenwriting gig. Fuck it, share it to AO3 if it's horny enough. You might have a better version of Ant-Man 3 inside your noodle. And if you do, fly free. Write the scripts you want to write, practice what you want to practice to become a stronger storyteller, and eventually turn those story beats into original ideas for your own projects. No one is stopping you. Channel that anger into a writing career. I've been doing it for 34 years and it fucking rules. Before James Gunn is ruthlessly killed by Mr. Brothers, an obvious parody of the evil head of Warner Brothers, David Zaslav, he hands over Jerry's finished Maximum Velocity script on a lacy, rugged mini hard drive. Those bad boys are a staple in the world of production, and I still have the very first one I bought in college. But man, gun on gun gun violence strikes again! In the post-credits scene, Jerry confirms that Space Jams 3 through 6 have already been greenlit by WB in the Parmesian dimension, and he hops back into the movie-lizer with LeBron James and the Looney Tunes, who are still playing basketball together after all these years. These are just some of the Easter eggs and details that I could find in Ricker Than Fiction, but I want to know if there's anything that I missed in the comments. I'm Scarlet Wit, and you're watching WhitneyVision.